The morning began quietly, the kind of calm Claire Morgan trusted, because it never asked her for anything. Pale sunlight slid through the thin curtains of her Vermont home, touching the wooden floor and the small table where her coffee waited, untouched. She moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, her steps slow but certain, shaped by years of living alone and learning how to be comfortable with silence. Outside, the street was still, lined with maple trees already letting go of their leaves, each one falling like a soft goodbye. Claire stood by the window, holding her mug, thinking about nothing in particular, and everything at once. How mornings used to feel fuller. How time had quietly rearranged her life without asking permission. She had reached a place where routine felt like safety, and safety felt enough. That was when the knock came. It was gentle, almost unsure, not the sharp sound of urgency, or the confident knock of someone expected. It felt out of place, like a question interrupting a statement. Claire froze, her fingers tightening slightly around the mug. No one ever knocked this early. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, letting the sound fade into nothing. But the knock came again, just once, carrying the same careful weight. She set the mug down and walked to the door, her heart beating faster for reasons she couldn't explain. When she opened it, she found Daniel Reed standing on her porch. He was her neighbor's son, someone she had known for years in passing, wave, smile, nod, nothing more. Yet this morning, he looked different. His hair was slightly unkempt, his jacket zipped halfway, as if he had rushed without thinking. His eyes held a tired depth that made him seem older than his 30 years, like sleep had not been kind to him in a long time. He stood straight but tense, his hands resting at his sides as if he didn't know what to do with them. For a second, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them felt thick, filled with unspoken reasons. "I'm sorry to come by so early," Daniel said finally, his voice low but steady. "I didn't know where else to go." The words landed softly, but carried weight, and Claire felt them settle somewhere deep in her chest. She stepped aside without thinking, opening the door wider. "Come in," she said, her voice calm even as something inside her shifted. Daniel hesitated for half a breath, then crossed the threshold, bringing the cool morning air with him. As she closed the door, Claire noticed how he looked around, not out of curiosity, but as if grounding himself, taking comfort in the ordinary space. The kitchen was simple, wooden chairs, a small table, a shelf of books near the window. Nothing impressive, nothing hidden. She gestured toward the table, and he sat, his shoulders relaxing just a little. Claire poured another cup of coffee without asking, placing it in front of him. The silence returned, but this time it felt different, like a pause rather than an ending. Daniel wrapped his hands around the mug, staring into it as though the dark surface might give him answers. Claire sat across from him, studying his face carefully, seeing signs she had missed before, the faint lines of worry, the way his jaw tightened when he breathed. She realized then that she had never truly looked at him, not like this. Outside, a car passed, the sound distant and brief, and then the world seemed to hold its breath. Daniel lifted his eyes to meet hers, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding that this visit was not about small talk or neighborly politeness. It was about something heavier, something that had followed him here. Claire didn't ask questions. She had learned long ago that some stories needed space before they could be told. She simply waited, offering him her presence, unaware that this quiet morning, which had begun like every other, had already changed shape, bending toward a moment neither of them had planned but both would remember. They sat at the small kitchen table as the morning continued without waiting for them, light growing stronger while the air between them stayed quiet and tight. Daniel held the coffee with both hands, warming them, but he did not drink right away, his eyes fixed on the surface, as if it held something fragile. Claire watched him carefully, noticing how his foot tapped once and then stopped, how he took a slow breath before speaking, as if each word cost him effort. "I didn't plan to come here," he said, finally breaking the silence, his voice controlled but thin. "I woke up and felt like I couldn't stay in my own house another minute." He paused, searching for the right words. "Everything there feels loud, even when no one is talking." Claire nodded, not interrupting, her posture open, her attention steady. Daniel continued, faster now, like he feared losing courage. He spoke about his job in Boston, the one everyone admired, the one that paid well and looked solid, yet felt empty every time he stepped into the office. He talked about mornings spent staring at the ceiling, nights filled with restless thoughts, and the pressure of being the son who was supposed to be doing well. "I did what I was supposed to do," he said quietly. "I followed the plan. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like myself." His voice softened, and for the first time, his eyes lifted fully to hers. Claire felt a deep pull of recognition. She remembered her own years of smiling through dinners, of nodding while her heart slowly pulled away from a life that no longer fit. She shared none of it aloud, but her expression told him she understood. Daniel spoke of dreams he once had, writing stories late at night, traveling without a strict plan, loving someone without measuring risk first. He laughed once, without humor, and shook his head. "It sounds foolish when I say it out loud." Claire leaned forward slightly. "It doesn't," she said, her voice gentle but sure. The words steadied him. He exhaled, his shoulders lowering, as if he had been carrying something heavy for too long. He admitted he felt lost, that he was afraid of disappointing his parents, afraid of starting over, afraid of staying exactly where he was. The rain began outside, soft and sudden, tapping against the window in a steady rhythm, filling the room with quiet movement. Claire listened as Daniel spoke faster, unloading thoughts he had kept locked away, his words tumbling out, but never losing control. She didn't rush him, didn't offer easy comfort, only honest attention, and that made him feel safe enough to keep going. When he finally stopped, the silence returned, but it no longer felt sharp. It felt earned. Daniel looked tired but lighter, like someone who had set something down. "I don't know why I came here," he said, almost to himself. "But sitting here, talking to you, it feels like I can breathe again." Claire felt warmth spread through her chest, mixed with a careful awareness. She had not expected this connection, this closeness born from honesty, but she did not pull away from it either. She met his gaze, calm and steady, and said, "Sometimes people just need a place to tell the truth." Daniel nodded, holding her eyes a moment longer than necessary, and in that shared look lived something quiet and powerful, not desire, not promise, but the first hint of a bond formed in trust. Outside, the rain continued, and inside the small kitchen, two lives moved slightly off their planned paths. Guided by words finally spoken and heard, the rain grew steadier, tapping against the window with quiet purpose, as the room settled into a deeper calm, and Daniel leaned back in his chair as if his body was only now realizing how tired it was. Claire stood to refill the coffee, her movements slow but thoughtful, aware of the space between them yet feeling it shrink in a way that surprised her. When she returned to the table, Daniel was watching her, not with expectation, but with something softer, like relief mixed with respect. He spoke again, quicker now, his voice clearer, saying that he had spent years convincing himself that comfort was the same as happiness, that being needed was the same as being fulfilled. He admitted how lonely it felt to succeed in ways that did not feed his heart, how hard it was to admit that he wanted more when nothing was technically wrong. Claire listened closely, her hands folded, recognizing the fear beneath his honesty, the fear of being seen fully and still not knowing what to do next. She told him, simply and truthfully, that wanting more did not mean failing, that longing was not weakness, and her words landed gently but firmly, like something he had been waiting to hear. Daniel smiled then, a small real smile that softened his face, and he said, "You make this feel lighter, not as a compliment, but as a statement of fact." The words stayed with her, stirring something she had kept quiet for years, a sense of being needed not out of duty but understanding. The rain outside slowed, leaving a soft grey light that filled the kitchen, and time seemed to move differently, neither rushing nor standing still. Daniel stood at last, stretching slightly, as if reminding himself that the world still existed beyond the table. He thanked her again, his voice steady but warmer now, and as he reached for his jacket, hesitation showed in the way his hand paused midair. "I didn't expect this morning to change anything," he said, "but it did." Claire felt the weight of that sentence settle between them. She walked him to the door, every step filled with awareness, every breath careful. When he turned to face her, their eyes met, and in that brief silence lived possibility, restraint, and respect all at once. Nothing needed to be said. Daniel stepped outside, the cool air brushing past them, and Claire watched as he walked down the path, his posture straighter, his pace calmer. She closed the door slowly, resting her hand against it, feeling the echo of his presence linger in the quiet house. The kitchen felt different now, charged with something unnamed, and as Claire returned to the table, she realized that comfort and connection were not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they arrived quietly, like rain easing after a storm, leaving behind the promise of something that might grow if given time. After Daniel left, the house felt unusually still, not empty but changed, as if the walls had quietly taken note of what had just happened. Claire stood for a moment where he had been, listening to the faint sound of his footsteps fade outside, then moved back into the kitchen, noticing details she usually ignored: the cooling coffee, the soft light stretching across the table, the slow ticking of the clock reminding her that time was moving forward whether she was ready or not. She sat down and let herself breathe, feeling a mix of calm and restlessness settle in her chest, a feeling she had not allowed herself in a long time. For years, her life had been built on careful balance, on routines that kept pain away and expectations low, and this morning had gently disrupted that balance without asking permission. She thought about Daniel's words, not repeating them, but sensing the honesty behind them, the courage it took for him to walk across the street and admit he was lost. It reminded her of her own past, of the moment she realized love and certainty did not always arrive together, and how she had chosen safety when life became too uncertain. She stood and opened the window slightly, letting fresh air carry away the last of the rain, watching the clouds slowly break apart as sunlight returned in thin lines. Outside, the world continued as normal, cars passing, birds settling, but inside her, something had shifted. She did not name it, did not rush to understand it, but she felt awake in a way she had forgotten. Daniel's visit had not promised anything, had not crossed any lines, yet it had reopened a door she believed was closed, the door to connection built on truth rather than need. She cleaned the table, moving with purpose, grounding herself in small actions, but her thoughts stayed close to the quiet strength she had seen in him when he chose honesty over silence. Claire realized that sometimes change did not arrive with drama or clear direction. Sometimes it arrived as a conversation, a shared morning, a reminder that hearts could still respond even after long rest. She returned to the window and looked toward the Reed house, seeing nothing but stillness, yet feeling a thread now stretched between two lives that had existed side by side without touching. She did not imagine the future or create expectations, but she allowed herself to feel hope, gentle and cautious, like light after rain. As the morning moved toward afternoon, Claire understood that this day would stay with her, not because something happened, but because something began, an awareness that life still held room for connection, understanding, and quiet romance shaped by respect and timing. She closed the window, letting the house settle again, and carried with her the calm knowledge that some mornings do not end when the door closes, they linger, reminding the heart that it is still capable of opening when the knock is honest and the moment is right.